everyone. Welcome back to Build. I'm your host, Brittany Jones Cooper. In Cleo Wade's second book, Where to Begin, she continues to move us with her heartfelt poetry and affirmations. But above all, she uses her words to inspire readers to remain hopeful and to take an active role in building a positive future for all of us. Please help me welcome Cleo Wade.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good. It's so good to be back.
Yeah, so good to have you back. And do you like seeing your book cover
Oh
this
my
large?
gosh. When I was walking in the hallway, I was like, oh, wow.
Right, because I'm sure it's just such a process to write a book and then the effort that goes into it. So what does it feel like that, your readers will get a chance to hold it in their hands tomorrow and really read your words?
It feels, it's so thrilling. And I still think I'm a little bit in disbelief because if you would have said to me at, if you would have said to me this time last year, you're going to be putting another book out next year, I would have been like, hell no. I doubt it. But when I was on the road last year for Heart Talk, I was touring and I was touring a lot of big cities. I did a smaller town tour also. And I was so moved by hearing people over and over and over again say to me, whether they were saying, what's your self-care like right now? Or how do you stay sane? And they'd always ended with, especially during these times. And I just kept hearing that over and over again. And that really moved me to want to write this book because, yeah, what are we doing, especially during these times, to find comfort or a space to find calm or replenishment so that we can get out there and be in the world that feels so overwhelming?
I read that your other book actually inspired this book where you had opened up to a page and you saw a
Yeah.
passage and you're like, yes, that's how I'm feeling. How do I spread that message?
I'd randomly opened up to a page in Heart Talk. It's a poem called Tired. And I was reading through it because I think I was about to do a reading somewhere. And so I was kind of trying to pick something. And there's this one line in the poem that says, I was tired of seeing evil everywhere, so I found the heavenly spots and showed my neighbors where they were. And that was the moment that, even though I wasn't sure before that moment that I had the energy to write the book, even though I was really feeling the book coming along after the tour, I was feeling the information coming to me, and I was like, I think there's something here I want to write. And then when I saw those words, that was when I really said to myself, okay, you have to create a heavenly spot and you have to show your neighbors where it is.
Because you talk about this is basically a book for you as well, that you wanted to put all the positive affirmations and poems in one place so that when you're feeling overwhelmed, you as the author can pick it up.
Yeah.
Which I loved.
One of the poem that takes up the majority of this book, or a huge chunk of this book anyway, is something that I wrote a couple of years ago, and it was right before the election, but it was right when the narrative that we are more divided than ever before really started to seep into our culture. And that I started writing kind of this conversation between myself and the world, and what it looked like at just not only your strongest moment to answer the world, but your most brave and your most clear. And that poem turned into a TED Talk. And then that, over the past 2.5 years, I found myself going back to it every time. If there was another tragedy, whether it was a natural disaster or a mass shooting or whatever was happening in the world, and I really just felt like I wanted to turn away from the world because it's so overwhelming and your anxiety gets so high and it can be really scary, and you really feel helpless. You really feel like you don't know what to do. And every time I needed to kind of move from a place of helplessness to a place of being hopeful and being brave enough to show up, I would go back to this one poem. And so it was really important for me to finally put it in a place where other people could read it too, because, I wasn't going back and just watching my TED Talk. It'd be a little weird to be like, and then when I had a bad day, I'd watch myself in a video.
Or that's a great way to
yeah,
spend a bad day. I don't know.
And so I really wanted to put it in a place where I could read the words because they really strengthened me in such a way.
And that poem is Where to Begin.
Yes.
And it is 91 pages long.
Yes, it's so funny. I didn't think of that being such a thing until I started doing interviews for this book, and everyone keeps saying to me it's 91 pages long, and I was like, is that weird? But it is a little weird because I'm very much associated with my short form. Yeah. So
Brevity is a strength of yours, but also it's not 91 pages of full text. And I love the way it is spaced out because it gives you a chance to really read the words and take them in. It's not like you're overwhelmed with a bunch of text.
yeah, it's breathable. And I think if there's one thing that if you read my work or you've bought any of my books, I think you know that you can always count on it being a chaos-free space. You know, if you read my work, it is never going to be the thing that dumps more negative energy on you or makes you feel worse or even just makes you feel a further sense of hecticness. You can really always, you know, for me, the intention is that my work can always feel soothing. It can always feel calming. It can always make you feel like the answer is a lot simpler than we could have imagined.
And the answer is often more simple.
Yeah.
And in this, you really kind of encourage people to have conversations, which sounds
Yeah.
really simple, but it's something we find very hard to do, especially now, given what people are
Yeah.
saying to you on your tour. And to pull out a quote from the poem, it says, "You can always achieve the triumph of radical empathy," which I thought to be maybe one of the most powerful lines out of that.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for you? What does that quote mean to you?
You know, to be able to put yourself in another person's shoes non-judgmentally is the starting point for all of the healing we need within our community. And I do truly feel, and it's a huge theme that runs throughout the book, is the importance of focusing on our healing. You know, there's so many things, and we can't help the things that happen to us, and they can be so awful, and they can be things that create so much trauma and heartache and pain in our lives, but they do not have to define us. And what does enable them to define us is not healing them or healing them improperly or incorrectly. And so for me, I think that through conversation, I have found so much healing in my own life. And so I really wanted to discuss that throughout the book and also give starting points. I mean, the book is also called Where to Begin because throughout the poem, it's, you know, we have a million different starting points in our life. It's not just about the day we're born or the day we're reborn or the day we turn 30 or the day we turn 50. Every single morning can be a new place, a new starting point to begin. Every moment, you know, if you found yourself being impatient or lacking compassion, you always have the opportunity to go into the bathroom for 2 minutes and take 2 or 3 deep breaths and tell yourself, I'm ready to go out there and be the person I know I can be, rather than the person I was just now in that moment.
I think it's just a reminder to people to have that mindset because we are in this age where there's a lot of discourse and a lot of debates and a lot of conversation. And I think you're right, like, are you being loving to that person who you disagree with? And why can't you be loving to that person who you maybe don't see the world the same as?
Or respectful, right? I mean, you know, we will go and have an entire conversation with someone or a debate, and we're not rooting for the other person. You know, we don't sit down and even allow for them to feel capable of understanding where we're coming from. We'll sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to talk to them. But they're not going to get it anyway, so we talk down to them or we speak in a way that just further pushes them away from us rather than ways that are asking ourselves, you know, not how to find common ground, but how to acknowledge that we're already standing on common ground.
That we are a part of this together,
Yeah.
which
And
again,
there's nothing we can change when we are not together. You know, being together is the thing that will create a world that makes us all safer, a world that is more just, a world that is more equitable and fair and equal.
again, so simple, so hard for people to get into their heads.
But I think our pain gets in the way. I think that, you know, a lot of the times my pain and my life experience will make me think or vote one way and yours may have you think or say something or vote in another way. And I think when we can address the unhealed pain and really feel for that person's human experience, I think that then we can live in the potential of what we can build together, rather than in the delusion that there's, only that there's nothing we can build together.
Part of that is silence, right? People have a lot of fear and they think speaking out will actually be a negative thing. But in several points in the book, you talk about how silence is something that you should really try to do away with, and that speaking that truth is the only way to really heal yourself and others. So that was really powerful.
I think also when we speak out, we create a space for someone else to say, "Yeah, I went through that also," or
Me
"Me
too.
too." And look what happens. Look at the people who are, were sitting in a space of powerlessness and found their power because one person spoke out. And I think that when we all can approach the world really embodying and knowing and understanding our power, that's what keeps us engaged in the world. That's what keeps us being active citizens rather than hiding under our blankets or you know sitting at home and saying and kind of throwing up our hands instead of rolling up our sleeves.
It doesn't make it go away. What you talk about, and I like, you give us a little more insight into your background. It's
Yeah.
a little extra vulnerable, I feel like, this time around. And you talk
Yeah.
about you growing up in New Orleans and the issue of race and how for a long time you stayed silent about
Yeah.
some of the racism you were encountering, but then how you found the voice to speak out. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, my brother and I talk about it all the time because we were often the only kids of color in all white spaces. And, it's hard when you're younger, especially. I think you don't have the tools and the language to understand how to properly stand up for yourself, or even I think how to address something that is painful in a way that you're not really sure you understand, because sometimes even our parents don't have the tools for that type of expression, or their tools have been to just turn your head and walk away and don't let it bother you.
Go high.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that because of that, I think the unsaid things kind of turned into almost unlived lives that were buried within, my brother and I's childhood and teenage years, and so really working, whether it was finding safe spaces as an adult to learn how to express myself more, whether that was with my group of girlfriends or in therapy, that is really what helped me to understand the value of not swallowing it, and not taking on what isn't mine to take on. And it has been such a healing journey to understand that, and you find so much self forgiveness in that, because it's actually way easier to forgive another person than it is yourself. And I struggled for years thinking like I should have said something in that moment, or I wish I would have known how to be braver, or I should have spoken up, or maybe I should have said something to someone about the thing that someone said, or that behavior. And I didn't, because I didn't think I mattered. When you're a kid, you don't really feel like you have much agency, or you don't think that you even have the privilege of speaking up in a way, or it's even if you think you have the privilege of speaking up, you don't think you have the privilege of being listened to. And so that's why, especially during these times, I always say that if we are going to live in this era where we're telling people to speak up and be seen and be heard, we have to remember that someone has to take responsibility for listening. And so that's why when I tour, I, will talk for maybe 30 minutes or an hour, but I spend 4 hours listening when we have community time for the entire rest of the tour.
I do love that you talk about the work you have to do on yourself, but also that generational trauma, which I think for families of color, I just hope that more and more families are starting to be aware of that. It's conversations I've had with my cousin where we're addressing like our family's past and how we move forward with our children. And I just think that's a very important thing to be aware of and to have conversations about, because a lot of that trauma we like to think is ours, but really it's maybe been going on for a long time in our families.
Well, and the strategies that worked for our parents or their parents aren't the same strategies we need to adopt. And I think that the world has been bust open a little bit more. I mean, even just for this generation, I mean, hearing the word white privilege was not something I ever heard in my own childhood. And, I know I'm not a child and I'm actually having one, but I don't feel that far away from it either. And so when I see that I do think the world is moving towards a place, and maybe because our voices have become so much more democratized because of social media platforms, I do think that we are in a place where the conversations can change, and our ability to speak up, is we have more of an ability to speak up.
Which is why that I love that you include other kind of thinkers or people of this time like DeRay.
Yeah.
So tell me why it was important for you to also include him in your book and things that he has said to you that kind of inspired you.
Yeah, I included a lot of words from my friend Ray, Tal Ben Shahar, who's the happiness professor at Harvard. Um, who else did I include? A lot of my different girlfriends I included in the book too. I wanted this book to be focused on the tools I'm using in this moment. And so I was pretty honest and real about that, they don't all just come from me. They're not all things that, I mean, some of it, I think I even quoted a podcast I really like.
Quoted Gene, the 100-year-old guy, too.
Yes, I quoted my friend's 100-year-old grandpa. I quoted John Lewis, and I think that we, you know, I wanted to really share what not just inspired me, but just kept me motivated during these times, and so much of what motivates me. Is the community that I feel so fortunate to be involved in, or witness to, and so I feel really like I feel like I'm in this book. I get to introduce a lot of the people who read my work to my really good friends.
We also have to talk about the baby. You mentioned you're pregnant.
I
Congratulations.
am. Thank you.
And when I was reading the book, I thought about that when I was reading the poem We Were Happy. And it's about sort of the innocence of childhood and how things like racism are very much taught to us, and how you kind of want to be able to go back to that mindset. In preparing to be a mother, does that get you excited to sort of like see the world through their eyes one day?
I feel so lucky that I get to spend so much of my life with young people, whether it's the amazing work I get to do with the Lower East Side Girls Club and all of the girls being so involved in my life, and they're my greatest teachers. And so, I really look forward. James Baldwin used to always say that children never listen to their parents, but they never fail to imitate them. And so when I think about what I really want for my child, I think less about, okay, what do I want to teach you and what do I want you to know? But I've actually started focusing more on what type of person do I want to be, because I do realize that my child will absorb the energy or the practices of how I move through the world, kind of like what we were talking about with our parents. And then I'm just so excited to listen and see, because I can't tell you when I have my group chats with the girls from the Lower East Side Girls Club, or when we have our FaceTime dates, and I've never walked away from a single conversation with any of them and not had to write something down or talk to my fiance Simon about it and say, oh my gosh, Aisha said the most amazing thing today, and it really made me rethink XYZ, and it really helped me understand how much more simple something can be. And so I'm so grateful. I feel like it's preparing me for what would be most important for me for motherhood.
Do you know what you're having yet?
I do, but I realize that I haven't asked Simon if we can say, so I don't think I can say.
Where's Simon?
I know.
Just joking.
But
do you hope that he or she will pick up your books one day? I mean, do you write with that in mind now, that this is a book that I hope one day my child can pick up and have some sort of connection to?
yeah, I just hope to have a child that's happy. I feel like when you get, maybe it's too specific to want one or two things for your child. I think that and we start building it so early, right? And so for us, we're not really concerned with, even when we talk about the gender, we talk about it in the sense of, reminding ourselves that our child will also have the chance to choose their gender and how they want to be identified in this world, and that we don't want to start raising the child before it's even born to feel the need to be one way or have to feel that they will ever need to escape a certain identity. And that's something that's really been important to us as parents, even in how we start to think about it at these really early stages.
That's really special. I love hearing that. I mean, yeah, I think that's really encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest part for so many people when it comes to claiming their gender identity or their sexuality is, the dreams or hopes or vision that other people put on them, thinking that that was what was best for them, when really what was best for them is the thing that's always best for anyone, and that's to be able to be your full and complete self and be loved for it. And we're just really excited and prepared to do that as parents.
I love hearing that because I feel like last time you were here, we talked about your childhood a little bit, and it sounded like you had two parents who were creative and artistic and kind of
Yeah.
allowed you to find your own path in that way. So
Yeah.
we see that it can work if children are just allowed to kind of grow and blossom and be who they want to
Yes,
be. Yeah.
exactly.
Well, before we go, we do have some questions. Who has the first one?
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, Brittany. Hi, Cleo. Thank you so much for writing your book. You're inspiring me. My question I wanted to ask you is, what advice would you give to writers? I'm actually writing back over the summer. I used to write poetry. What advice would you give, like, to anyone who wants to become a writer?
Well, if you're writing, then you don't have to worry about becoming a writer. You're already a writer. And just write. I think that no matter where you are when the thoughts are coming, to write it. Write it on a napkin, write it in your notepad. Uh, if it's, I think that the difference between writers and non-writers are the people who are writing and the people who aren't. And so, and writing, just like anything else, you get better at it the more you do it. It becomes more of you the more you do it. And so, my only advice would be to write and then write some more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next one?
I have another advice question, please.
Sure.
So some of my friends are poets and they're still getting started, so they submit to like magazines and journals where they don't get paid. And some of our other friends are like, you shouldn't do that. Like, you should never work for free and stuff like that, even though they're not really getting many paid opportunities now. So I was wondering if you have any advice about that, or if that's something you grappled with getting started.
Yeah, I think that it's really can be tough. I don't know a single person who didn't work in some way for free or doesn't still do certain types of projects for free. I don't think that anyone should think that the only way to achieve their dreams is to never get paid for it, and that's a standard. That is definitely not true. But I do think that in any creative field, there is kind of this blend of the things that you'll do for free and then the things that will be your money jobs. And I also think that, I used to always say that, before I could actually make money as a writer, I would say that I had a passive income, which is how I made money doing my other jobs or things I had, but I was still always a writer. And if someone asked me what I did, I would always say that I was a writer or that I write poetry, because that is who I felt like I was, even if that wasn't paying the bills. And so I will say that I'd find the balance in that work, because sometimes it's a good, not just a good opportunity, but it's a good mental or emotional exercise to write and then put it out into the world and then see how you're able to the world is interacting with the work, and that can be really informative. And so you can also look at some of that free work as a learning experience that can be so valuable to developing your voice and understanding where and how you want to speak and in what spaces. You're welcome.
I know you're also embarking on another book tour for this.
I start my book tour tonight.
Today.
I got up at 4 a.m. this morning. I'm going to go take a nap after this. And yes, I go on a 10-city tour starting tonight. I'm So excited. I swear, I feel like I only write books in order to tour. I love touring so much. I love being in the room with my audience so much. And yeah, any time anyone comes to my tour, I think they know that it's a place where they just can come and make friends. I mean, I would say more than half of the people come alone, and we form different groups all over the country for people to make friends and be in each other's lives and support each other's creative dreams or emotional healing. And it's such an amazing experience.
And it very much goes in line with the book when you talk about community and just building conversation. I think it's so important, especially now. So thank you for being called to write this book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so
And
much.
if you guys want your own copy, Where to Begin is available tomorrow, October 8th, wherever books are sold. And you can find out more about that 10-city book tour she mentioned at cleowade.com. Put your hands together for Cleo Wade.
Thank you.